Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast Time Under Tension. Today is episode 9, and we're talking about relationship over religion. And that's not to say that religion in and of itself is a bad or negative thing, but I think that it's something that a lot of us tie some negative emotions to or have had experiences within that haven't been positive. And so there's some undertones with the word religion and the concept of it. And I just wanted to kind of present this today as an opportunity to maybe reframe what religion means and get back to the core of what it means to have a relationship with God. So, first off, let's start with your background in a religious setting. Like, what has religion meant to you in your life?
Mhm. I think religion to me is a little tainted and has a little bit of trauma attached to the word itself. Um, and again, I think you make a really good point. Religion is not a bad thing. It's not a thing that we can call good or bad. I think it's more about what the word defined, what your personal definition of religion is just through your experiences. And so mine growing up in a Catholic religion setting. Again, if Catholicism is for you, that's great. For me, in my experience, it turned into this concrete box of rules and regulations that must be followed to get to heaven. And if you didn't fit in these boxes, then you needed to either change yourself to fit in the box or you needed to not be present in the box. It was more, these are truths according to us, and if these truths don't match yours, then you need to check yourself kind of situation. And for me, obviously, I found my experiences where I was asking a lot of questions, just trying to learn because I didn't have the elementary school and junior high experience of Catholic education like most of my classmates did in high school. That when I started asking questions, there was no true answers for me. And that in itself just I really struggled to then feel like I was being told I needed to be a certain way to reach heaven and I needed to go through a third party to even speak to God, that religion in itself became this place of shame and something that didn't I wasn't able to belong to by the end of my high school career. But yours is different. What was your experience with religion?
Yeah, I mean, I had a really positive experience with religion. And definition wise, I think it's important to go over that. I had to look this up because I have this concept in my mind of what religion is and what it's meant to me. But I wasn't sure exactly what the definition of it is because it is so tied to a lot of different feelings. According to Britannica, religion is human beings' relation to that which they regard as holy, sacred, absolute, spiritual, divine, or worthy of reverence. That definition to me is what religion, quote, should be. It's the way in which we relate. It's an expression of relation. Now, Merriam-Webster defines it as a personal set or institutionalized system of religious beliefs, attitudes, and practices. And that's what I often feel is equated with religion, where it's that box. It's this list of rules. It's this is how we act in this setting. Like this is our church and our beliefs, and you must adhere to these and be a representative of these out in the world. Whereas the other definition to me has the fluidity of relationship within it. I grew up in church, started in a Baptist church, but mostly grew up in non-denominational, which I really appreciated because it provided an opportunity for people with different backgrounds to come in, people who had come from Catholicism or a Baptist type community or Pentecostal, and just came together over the things that in general most of us agree upon the Bible saying. Within those spaces, because I started in there as a kid, I was able to do vacation Bible school every summer. That was always really like a fun setting, which I think is cool to for it to be something that's engaging for kids. I was in Awanas, so that had me memorizing Bible verses for several years, which maybe I didn't comprehend them super well at the time, but I do think that there's a lot of value in the background of like Bible knowledge I was able to get from that. And then being homeschooled, I didn't have a social group. So for me in middle school and high school, having small groups to go to every Wednesday, the group every Sunday, and then outings and uh, trips that we would do, both mission trips and retreats, all of those things provided me this experience that I probably wouldn't have had socially otherwise, and in an environment that was fairly sheltered, I guess, where I was around people who had a lot of similar beliefs. And I think there's pros and cons to that. But as a kid, when you're really impressionable, I think it is helpful to be around people who do share similar values. And now that I'm older and can go back and say, okay, here's what I actually believe, I am really grateful for those times I was surrounded in a community like that with people who had values that now that I can confirm, I say, okay, I actually do believe those things. So I feel like I've been able to live in alignment very well because of that atmosphere that I was able to grow up in. That said, after all that, I went to a Christian college and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it was just a continuation of like this smaller world that I had been in. And there were a lot of rules around like curfews, and we couldn't, and just because of the sect, the religious sect, it was, no instruments and just like specific rules that didn't seem super fair in regards to what girls were allowed to do versus boys. And that's when I started to see it as religion more, where I'm like, this feels like an institutionalized system. This feels like a list of rules. And if you're outside of it, there's shame applied and you should feel bad. And that's when I really started disconnecting from religion, where I thought, okay, I thought that this was a place or an environment in which I could express the belief that I have, the relationship that I have, which I've always been able to do freely. Now it feels like if I'm not following these rules, I need to be punished or else I should be feeling really guilty. And then do I feel guilty if I don't feel guilty? And then it made me start questioning everything that I had ever thought.
Yeah. I think one of the big things you are talking about is the self-reflection piece and knowing what you believe is super important. And I think there's just one thing I want to add in here because it could be taken as if rules aren't important from what I just said. And I think having quote unquote rules, or if we're looking at the Bible, if that's what we want to talk about in terms of, instruction or the rules that we're supposed to follow and things like that, there are absolute truths from the word of God, from Jesus, that speak to, the 10 commandments, for example, are something that are rooted in love. I just feel there's a distinction between a translation in the Bible that someone has taken and applied as a rule that is more just a translated version of what someone else said in a book, which I'm not discrediting that at all. I'm just saying there is a specific difference between when Jesus is actually speaking or if God's the one that spoke words. That if a particular rule is in place and it's rooted in love, and the rule is in place because it's allowing for love between two human beings, in terms of just respect. It doesn't need to be anything intimate. It's just your relationship with another person. A lot of those rules are in place because that's creating a peaceful, loving world. And I don't want to talk speak to those rules. I think whenever we're talking about religion, there are those universal truths like we speak to that are always pointing towards being more kind and compassionate, loving everybody around you, not judging, not killing, things like that. Obviously, that's extreme, but I more am speaking to the fact that there are multiple translations of the Bible. And when it comes to the rules and regulations that then are leading to condemnation of others or shaming others, being feeling superior to another person, those are the things that I really struggled with. And those were the rules that were put in place in particular religions that allowed for this box of these people that believe these specific rules to be true, these translations to be true, can be here, and if you don't, then you can't. And the distinction was openness to knowing Jesus. Like these rules were put into place, and all of a sudden we're separating the ability of somebody to be able to come in and experience Catholicism, for example, or Southern Baptist, knowing Jesus in that space. And we're saying, you don't get to know Jesus here. And this isn't a place for you because of all these rules, which is never once spoken to from Jesus. He's always inclusive, regardless of who you were 5 seconds ago and the mistake that you just made or the mistakes that you made 5 years ago. It doesn't matter. There's always this inclusion. And so I just wanted to make that distinction because I don't want this conversation about religion to, when we say rules and regulations, to be siloed to all of it. It's more about the aspects of religion that seem to be shutting people out of the ability to know God, or their closed-mindedness to a perspective that a particular child of God has on a topic, or just in engaging in an opportunity for community.
Yeah, and one thing I go back to is, and for those who don't come from a background of knowing the Bible, and that's what we speak from only because that's our background, right? I mean, I have not grown up in any other religious environment, so I know there's a lot of other situations and stories, but the foundational truth, when someone asks Jesus what the greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God above all, right? And then the second to these is to love your neighbor as yourself. And when I think about, okay, well, how am I supposed to be living? What am I supposed to be doing? I know that there's these rules in the Bible about how I should be living. And then there's things that I've kind of picked up in church that I was told, like, this is how things should be. And sometimes I have trouble sorting those out because they were both embedded in me at such a young age. I think I go back to, okay, in doing this action or in considering whether or not I'm going to make this decision, am I loving God and am I loving others? And if I'm in
Mhm.
alignment with both of those, pretty sure I'm probably in alignment with everything else. So it can feel really complicated, but I think that we can boil it down to that. I really feel like Jesus did that by saying that, and that can help clear up some of the confusion when it comes to, like, okay, it feels like there's all these things I should be doing and I can't differentiate. That's also how I go about, all right, I'm in this environment, this quote, like religious environment, this institution that has a set of rules inherent to it. Do I agree with the rules or what I'm being told in this environment? And it's like, okay, is this inclusively loving others? And it's God's role to judge people as well. So, like, there may be things that maybe aren't in alignment with his teachings. That's his job to take care of those people. My job is only to love them. So, am I loving others and am I loving God in this? And that is how I kind of filter things through it. Um, but I think that when I realized that that's what he said, it made me start questioning some of the things that I had been told in a religious environment, which I think can start to uproot some of the trust that some of us could have in that institution, whether that's a church or a school or even like a family where you have like certain rules applied to your religion within it. And I think that it's really important to find peace with the questions and to know that it's okay to doubt and it's okay to ask questions. And honestly, a relationship in which you don't work through things and struggle a little bit isn't going to be very deeply founded.
Yeah, I think that's so good. I know I kind of touched on self-reflection in it, but one that was so good. I thought that that just really simplified everything that I just said in the 5 minutes I was talking about it. And it really does allow for this simple two scriptures to refer back to when you're engaging in something, like I just really loved that. Um, but I think speaking to questioning and the self-reflection piece, my experience coming back to my faith was all about questioning it completely because I just completely dissociated myself. I went to a public university for college. I did live in a um, Christian Catholic dorm. Um, you know, my first 2 years there, but there was no theology course I was taking, or my classes were all exercise science, your gen eds that you have to take. I wasn't taking any kind of um, spiritual or religious course. And so I was really able to separate it. And I was taking a lot of science classes. I was taking classes with professors who didn't necessarily have a religious aspect to them. They were more science and factual. And so my exposure to the other side of, you know, atheists and just more science-based thinking really allowed for this massive contrast. And I always knew I had this deeper inner knowing in me that needed a spiritual something, because I just could not find this deeper purpose that brought fullness and joy and peace and all these things. I kept feeling like I didn't know what I wanted to do or who I was and all these things. And so after college, I really, when COVID happened and life stopped, I had the ability to really process through all of these different things I had been exposed to, whether it was someone who was atheist and believed more in science or Catholicism, or I dated someone who was Buddhist and I got really exposed to their practices and what they believed. And then I was, around someone who was Mormon. And so I just had all of these different spiritual uh, perspectives in my environment. And so I was able to really start to be like, well, what do I think about this? And I'm starting to question this. And as I'm going through that, religion was still a trauma word for me. God was still a trauma word for me at the time. And so for me, it was like, I do believe that there's something deeper in spiritual, and there's something about energies in the world. Like I really got into meditation. I really got into mindfulness, feeling my body, because there was such a disconnect between my mind and body. I was numb, not necessarily having much emotion at all. And so as I'm going through this, I'm questioning all of these things that I was learning. And as my journey continued, it went from believing in the universe and energies and connectedness, nature. Sorry, in my office, my light goes off if I'm not moving around enough. So going through this journey, I then was exposed to a life coaching path that made me do a roadmap of my life. And that's where I started to insert God back into the equation, because I knew that there was something there and I felt at peace after I would go to confession in high school. But I didn't really know how to enter into that again because I knew I couldn't do Catholicism. That box of rules and regulations just didn't allow for my fluidity of thought and my deep desire to know God and know myself, I started just asking God a lot of questions. And I just decided that I was going to have my own theology to start. And whether that was right or wrong, it was like, I don't know what I believe. And so to do that, I need to ask God questions and I need to get back into the Bible and more than just read the scripture, let him speak to me through it. And what do I need to learn from this? Starting from Genesis, the very beginning, that was perfect for me because I was struggling with sexuality so much. And so going through that and really being able to feel like I was having a relationship with God, like I was learning and being taught from him, that I was able to then understand that this relationship is what I need to start feeding. I need to start hearing what he's telling me about all of these things and start to learn what I truly think and believe right now. And then I can go from there and kind of figure out, you know, how does this concept that I believe fit a non-denominational or Christian value. And I can then kind of work from there. And that was the way that I did it, was asking a ton of questions and not feeling guilty about that. Because if I want to know something, I need to ask. And I don't want to just assume that I know the answers to anything because I don't know. All I have is all of this information. And I don't feel like I'm going to have this wisdom that's above anyone else that is going to be superior than anything in the Bible. It's like, I just want to know the truth, God. That's what I would say. I'm like, I just want to know what your truth is because this doesn't feel good to me. And it's not about feeling good. Like, I don't, me personally feeling good. It's like, this doesn't feel aligned. I don't feel like this could possibly be what you want for me if you're going to be constantly showing me grace and mercy and you sent your only son to die for me and all these things that then just because of this thing about me, this love that you speak so highly to being the thing that's most important in the Bible, I'm just a little confused and I just want to know. I don't need to that to be I don't need to be with a woman if that's not what you want and for me, but I want to know a little bit more why. And it was like just engaging in that vulnerable place with God, like this kind of all I know. I feel this deeper connection of intimacy with women, but if that's just something that's, from a past trauma, I don't know. It was like, I'm willing to be open. I'm willing to open my heart and my mind and everything if you can just help me to know and we can engage in this relationship instead of feeling so guilty that I'm even asking questions about something that is so concrete in a space. It's like there's almost this guilt and shame about even asking any questions because you shouldn't be questioning the
Mm.
word of God. It's like when you ask questions, it allows for him to show you what he truly means in your specific purpose for you, that it allows for this, much deeper connectedness to the world, to other people, and to yourself and God, I feel.
Yes. I think there's like this tendency sometimes within churches, religious institutions of like, we're going to land on the truth. And like, once we have the truth established, like, you don't want to be outside of that. Like, anyone who's not in alignment with that, like, you need to be careful of. And I understand, like, surround yourself with people who share values, at least the people you're surrounding yourself with a lot, or like taking your personal things to. Like, obviously, I think you need to be around people with all kinds of different viewpoints, and trust that you're going to have the discernment if you pray for it to know the truth within those relationships. So if someone else offers a different viewpoint, you can come to it with an openness and a willingness to learn and listen, but knowing truly what your values are and knowing how to do that self reflection after. But some of the environments in which I was in growing up were okay, with this branch of Christianity, we believe this regarding whatever, the Trinity. And so your friend who's Jewish, we know that they're not going to heaven, and it would be really hard for me to reconcile when I'm thinking God loves us all, and I know these people, and when I look at them and the way that they live, they're so loving and so inviting, and they've treated me like family, and they love God, and they talk about God, and they seem connected to their spiritual lives. But I can stand here from the outside and go, well, since they don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God, like they're going to go to hell. And there's like this sense of superiority with that that I didn't feel comfortable with. I didn't feel comfortable being able to even say that about them. And it made me uncomfortable that someone was telling me that about them, knowing that I don't know their heart. I don't know their relationship with God. And the way that I'm looking at it, they incorporate God into every part of their life more than I do. So how can I stand back and say something like that? And I think it's important to know what you believe, but to also question, also be willing to change based on when you learn new things. We were watching this show the other night called The Chosen, and it's I think in the first episode, it's from the perspective of this Pharisee who they're often like demonized in religious settings, but the Pharisees really were just teachers of religion. Like they had been teaching the religious law for hundreds of years. So like this was just their job. Like this was they knew the Bible inside and out at that point. And the reason that they're often spoken down to in the Bible or from in a church setting is because they reject Jesus when he comes. But honestly, like it wasn't in their repertoire to be accepting this new person coming in saying he's the son of God. Like everything they had studied didn't seem to point to this. So I think it's important to give them grace with that and also see where we can be like that as well. But in the
Mhm.
episode, the Pharisee presents like this new law about not fishing on the Sabbath and all this stuff that really just seems like it shouldn't matter at all, which is kind of funny because I think that's what we do sometimes is hyper focus on rules that really are completely irrelevant when all we need to do is love. And at one point in the show, he tells his wife, he's like, what if there's more to all this than we know? Like, what if we're only seeing a part of the whole story? What if God is greater than we can even fathom and it's all just more miraculous than we can even grasp? And she was like, don't talk like that. And he was like, well, it's okay to have doubt in your heart. And she's like, then keep it in your heart. And I think that one thing that really helped me at the beginning of this year was reading Psalms and hearing how many times David like openly doubted and cried and mourned to God and demanded that God save him. And I think that it's important that we understand that it's okay to question what we believe and it doesn't show a lack of faith. It shows a depth of relationship that I don't think that we could achieve without that level of honesty.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think am in a challenging spot. Not challenging spot. It's an experience that is challenging me again in this area about religion versus relationship here at Davidson. And um, there was an event that happened where I was going to speak at a group here, and all great, could kind of speak about whatever. And once the group found out about my sexuality, I was disinvited from speaking. And my initial reaction was, I totally respect that. Totally hear you. Your beliefs are your beliefs. And if I want to be respected for mine, then like I want to be respected for my beliefs and treated like a person. And I'm gonna show that same grace to someone who feels the same. And I still believe that to be a good response from myself. but I also now have had somebody who's higher up in academia here reach out to me hearing about the event and really struggling with the fact that it happened. He is the professor of religion here, a professor of religion here, and he teaches a class on things in modern society that seem to challenge the Bible, or things that are currently in our modern world that there's like this tension between if you're a particular religion or of faith, then you should not be like allowing these actions to happen. And one of the things that came up in his class was homosexuality, and it was earlier in the year, so um, he didn't know about this event, and it hadn't happened yet. So he has a section on homosexuality. He realizes that his class is a little more conservative than he would have ever thought in this day and age. And he was just a little surprised by it, but didn't really think much of it. He doesn't struggle with any sexuality. Um, he doesn't struggle with homosexuality or having to, um, I guess that's not something that he's experienced personally. And so with that, he just was kind of like, okay, this is where that class is at, and didn't really think there needed to be much more conversation at that point because there were other things to address. So he hears about this. He asked me if we can meet, and we're just having a conversation about it all. He hears my response, and he showed me a completely different side of this experience. Not that I needed to be rude or cause an uproar about it, but this is an opportunity for me to be an activist about relationship versus religion here. This is an opportunity for me to speak about my personal experience in the matter and share how I've gotten back to a very intimate relationship with God. And it allows for me to he allowed me to see that I am confident in my relationship with God. I am steadfast. I am very grounded in him because I've done all the work already. But there are so many people in the world right now who feel isolated, feel fearful of expressing their sexuality, are getting a lot of pushback from their peers about their sexuality. Just my entire high school experience right now. And I wasn't thinking to myself, this is an opportunity for me to speak to my past experience here and how I got to where I'm at now, and maybe present just an open-minded conversation about the difference between religion and relationship in my life, whether it's that Wikipedia definition or the actual definition that we kind of speak to, being more of that value driven, purpose driven relationship centered on love definition of religion. And so he and I met and we're like, okay, well, let's, talk about this. He thinks it should be brought back up in the school setting and the classroom setting. And I obviously agreed and am very active in the process of doing what I can, from just having the personal experience part and going through that, having a little bit of a different set of wisdom skills than him. And we've been kind of figuring out where to go. And this morning we had a really incredible conversation. You and I were prepping for this podcast and just going through the outline, and it being a religion versus relationship. I was just thinking about that during the lift, and something just I feel like God just placed this wisdom on me, and this is exactly where we should start, is that when Jesus came, the Bible verse of the day is that he is the way, the truth, and the life, and that he saved us from condemnation. He saved us to always have mercy and grace and a true relationship with God. We are no longer separated from God because of him, because of his death, because of his blood. And that in itself reminded me of all of the instances prior to Jesus's arrival, due to the original sin, kept us separate from God. We were separated from him. And that in itself created this space where rules and regulations had to be put into place to be obedient to God, knowing that Christ was not a thing yet. And so understanding that the old covenant is rooted in this place where we were separated, we weren't saved yet. We're in this place where we're a fallen world, and we're still living in that. But because Christ has died, all of a sudden we have this new covenant, we have newness, we have this ability to understand that we're always forgiven, and we can now have an intimate relationship with God through Christ. And so what I saw was this old covenant over here, we're holding on to needing rules and regulations in this space. We feel like we still need to hold on to all of this as if Christ didn't come and create an entirely new covenant for us. And one of the main things that, we were talking about was that exact thing of the Sabbath, that there were all these rules and regulations around you do not do work on the Sabbath, but Jesus then was performing miracles on the Sabbath. And then we talked about the example in Acts where Peter's on the roof and he says, he has never eaten anything unclean according to the rules and regulations. And then God sends down the blanket of all these do not call, essentially what God says is clean, we cannot call unclean. And that those two examples were just things that we were working through. And there's plenty of other examples that what we have decided as a fallen world and imperfect people, those rules and regulations, those cannot trump what Jesus says or what God says, because those are truth. That is truth. And that allows for change, that allows for growth, that allows for the Bible to be alive and applying to every single literal moment in our world. It's that we can have a particular set of rules and regulations, but once Jesus does something or says something or God says this, then that is the truth. And so it just allowed for this idea that just because something was said back here in this time doesn't always mean it's going to be true here if God says it's not. If God says it's true, then it's true. His yes is definite, but the facts, like we heard in that sermon, facts aren't final if God has something else to say, if Jesus has something else to say. And that, to us, both of us, it opened this new mindset. It opened the conversation to, yeah, that's true. That did happen. The Sabbath was this set in stone rule and regulation, but Jesus said, what's more important, me healing this man or me not? Like, because what you say we can't work on the Sabbath. It's like, that's a perfect example of how things are going to change if God says they're going to. And understanding that things that we think via a translation does not mean that that's the truth of the now. And so just understanding that through Jesus, there was newness, and we no longer have this separation that causes a lot of rules and regulations to be necessary. It's like we can have conversations with God. We have a literal direct connection, direct ability to have relationship with him now. And that's what needs to be the focus. It went from religion to relationship because now relationship is possible.
And I think that that is where we get caught up thinking that we're at the end of knowledge. And we talked about this yesterday in regards to technology or science and how like we always think we know everything now, and then we look back like 30 years ago and we're like, oh my God, why were we doing things that way? Like, not that long ago, people were like snorting opium, like it was just a normal thing to do. And now we're like, oh my God, that's a hard drug. And it's going to be the same thing in 30 years looking back at now. But like, we do that same thing with God where we think, oh, well, we totally understand and grasp God. And it's like, Jesus didn't even grasp equality with God as something that he could grasp, right? So, like, our thinking that we could grasp who God is in his fullness, or that he's not constantly revealing himself. We know he reveals himself through his word, but then we think like his word isn't still being written. And it's like he's revealing
Mm,
himself, revealing to us who he is every single day. But that means that we need to be open-minded and have the discernment and have the trust that when we ask him into our hearts, that he can then speak to us and reveal new truths to us, so that we're constantly evolving this concept of who he is and understanding more and more of him in his fullness. Um, and not getting so caught up in, okay, I figured out how to grasp God here, this is how, and this is the rules that keep us within this understanding, and missing the point of who he is, and that he's always going to surpass any box we could create, because no one of us can truly fathom him in his entirety. I think we are given different perspectives, and we come into the world with different backgrounds and experiences, and um, some traits that we're born with and some things that we develop. Like, we all come with a different perspective in order to present just a part of who God is to the world.
yeah. I think what just one distinction that I want to just add as well is that I don't mean that you can just have a part of you that doesn't, you know, these are opportunities to reflect with God. And if this is his will or not. It's not that whatever we're feeling to be our truths, we're just, all right, great. Because we're evolving, awesome. I don't need to even challenge this in myself. I don't even need to reflect on it because this is who I am and this is what I think. And that's that. It's like when something comes up that we're questioning, it has to be an open heart, open mind. You're willing to also receive that you could be wrong. And that is okay. That's just going to be like pulling a weed out of your garden. When you're planting the soil, things are going to bloom and they're going to be fruitful and multiply. And then you're also going to have these other parts of you that are rooted in false truths and trauma that you need to pull out. And that's going to be hard and that's going to be painful. And it's going to also shape you. It's going to be the thing that helps you grow into your most authentic version of you, your most full self, your truest being. And sometimes we're wrong. And that's why I knew I needed to go into the conversation about sexuality with God, knowing I could be wrong for sure. I don't know. I don't know the truth. I am open hearted and open minded to knowing his truth. And I needed to reflect in that. And it's not going to happen very fast all the time. Sometimes it'll be immediate. But all of that in itself is a tool to gain relationship. You can't just be, if you and I are dating, well, we are, but in the relationship, I can't assume I'm right all the time when I'm telling you something. We have different perspectives, like you're saying, and I'm able to understand that you could absolutely be right about something that I thought I was right about. It's the same thing with God. We have to be open minded and willing to actively listen to Him as well. I just wanted to make sure that I put that also in there because I don't think it's a free pass to just do whatever you want or be whatever you want. It's like you have a specific shape. We talked about this. Your spiritual gifts, your heart, the posture of your heart, what you're passionate about, what you crave, what you're emotionally just full with, your natural abilities, what you're born with, your personality and your experiences, like we're talking about. And this all in itself, what it's doing for you is that it's validating that you are so perfect exactly how you are. In your entirety, God created you perfectly in your imperfection. But the point is you're here to serve him and you're here to serve others, like we talked about in the very beginning with Matthew. Love God and love other people. That is going to create the fullness and the peace and the passion and our purpose that we also, all of us, crave that so deeply. It's your personal shape and it is so unique to you. No one else has that shape. But that also means that in your imperfections, you need other people's shapes. You need other people's perspectives. You need other people in the areas that God didn't give you strengths in, but he gave you weakness in. It's all of these things are so significant in how then we move forward in our purpose in serving others in the world. And it's understanding that our experiences, our most painful experiences, are going to be the things where we can, one, have the most growth in self, but also then go show compassion for someone else. it it is the thing that is centered around being more self forgetful, I think was the word that was in purpose driven life. Like, we are not here to be selfish people. We just know that we are whole. All of us are separately, and we need to be thinking of ourself less and thinking of others more. And that in itself, all of a sudden, relationship becomes everything. Relationship is everything. Relationship with God, relationship with other people, relationship with self. And once you start to expose your shape fully, the spiritual gifts come with spiritual maturity, come with questioning God, come with questioning religion, come with all of those things that you then all of a sudden find out who you are in the way that's going to literally change the world, because no one else can do the thing that you're doing. And that, to me, speaks to just how significant service is in the entirety of relationship period.
We talked about this in this last week about the value of community and relationship, because that's something that I've struggled with a lot. And I think that religion is something we can equate with church often. And that can also feel like a vague concept. Um, Going back to Matthew, Jesus said, "Where two or three gather in my name, there I am with them." And I think that that is, again, like getting to like the deeper root of what it means to be in community, what it means to be in church. Like, God is where any of us are, and we bring a piece of him as his creation to that relationship. And because our shapes complement each other, we can bring a fuller picture of who he is, and we can accomplish more together because of the combined like synergy of our gifts working together. Like, I feel like my relationship with God has grown so much in our relationship because of the combined perspective that we both bring, where, like you said, you can't come into it thinking you're always right. But besides thinking like, oh, I see where you're right, one thing that happens between us a lot of times is we're both talking and we're saying something different, but then we're like, wait, I think we're saying the same thing. And we're just getting a fuller picture of the truth. And I think that that's what happens in community. And I think that is the value of relationship. And that is the value of church. And that is the value of service. Like, we can be of service to the world. We can do more because of our combined efforts together and combined gifts and the synergy that we have with each other. But also not forgetting that, yeah, you're surrendering, you're giving to others, but it is the most fulfilling thing ever. I just listened to a podcast, Tom Bilyeu's podcast, and he interviewed this guy who was a nightclub owner, and he was just making bank and doing super well. And he just woke up and was like, not happy. Like, this, it was not a fulfilling life. And he decided to take a ship and go out and start like service work. And he started this company that's grown, and it's to provide clean water across the world. And they've saved just hundreds of thousands of lives. And he was like, the minute that I realized that money wasn't going to make me happy, I had to use a different indicator of success in my life. And
Mm.
through that, like, he had everything. Like, he had the status, he had the money, he had the girlfriend, he had all the things, but he realized that wasn't what filled him, and only by turning to service did he find that fulfillment again. And he came from a background of being in church. He came from a background of being embedded with religion, and he was like, "I'm gonna do the exact opposite of that." And it was like the prodigal son story, and he came back and he was like, wow, I'm not fulfilled in the world. Like, I'm only fulfilled by service. And just hearing him talk about how full he is getting to just, I mean, going to these massive companies and being like, can you give us this? Can you give us this? Like, asking for whatever they need, because he believes in this mission so much that he's able to surrender his life to it. So also knowing on the other side of it, it's like, you're not giving up. You're going to be so filled by it, much more than that just grinding effort of independence where I'm going to be on my own, I'm going to do my own thing. It's like, understand the value of community, and that the value of service is also in what you'll get out of it, how you'll see yourself, what you'll learn about yourself, and the peace that you'll have in your life. It's just, it's unmatched, because there's so many watershed effects to service that I think we often overlook.
Yeah, I think something so powerful you said is that just this idea that we also need to be served. Like, other people in our space are purposeful to us as well. It is a mutual connectedness where you and I are both completely whole in our individual beings, but we serve each other and we need to be also served. So having the mindset that every single person that's around you is going to teach you something or is placed there on purpose by God. You understanding that people enter your space to serve you also, in that you have limitations. There are things that you weaknesses, whatever you want to call them, and other people have strengths in those areas or have gone through an experience that you don't even realize you're entering yet, and they are going to provide a perspective that's going to allow for the fullness and the growth. It's like everyone around us is bringing us another part of God closer, and so knowing that you need to be served because you're not perfect is also important in all of it as well, because then we don't have this I'm superior to you thought process. It's like, oh, this person is teaching me, I'm being served right now. But also, I have my own set of gifts and strengths that I then can serve this person in another way. And I just think it's really important to have the distinction, I think, because for anyone to think that they're more superior than someone else or to disregard someone's thought or disregard someone's, you know, willingness to be vulnerable about anything, religion, viewpoint, to be specific, then all of a sudden we're completely limiting our ability to grow as well.
I think it's really important that all of this, everything that we've talked about in this podcast and past ones, it goes back to self-reflection, and it goes back to really digging down to the core of what you believe and what you value. Also being willing to change your view and know that you might be wrong, and you might learn more that informs you and changes your perspective, but you need to get down to the root of what you believe, and then everything else can kind of bud out of there. Once you know what you believe, if you decide you believe that life is based on love, then maybe the next natural step is, how do I show love? I can show love through service. Like, how do I be part of a service team? I can do so in a church setting, or, if I believe that part of my role is to express love to God, and I can do that within this confines, like, that's where it all starts from. And then you can go from there and decide, like, maybe I do try to be part of a church community and see how that goes. Just give it a shot, and be open to experiences, and be open to exposing yourself to people with different viewpoints, and start to define religion for yourself, in terms of religion being your expression of your relationship. It is a personal thing. Religion is a personal thing. When we lose that it's personal, that's when we apply it to this outer institution where, okay, there's these over here, it's like I have my faith, but like then there's these rules that lie outside of me, and I don't really know yourself enough to know what aligns, and then find a way to express that and be open to the setting that that might be in.
I think this would be a perfect, closing opportunity would be to speak to, like, really what are our needs as a person. And I know we talked about this chart you have here, this love and belonging. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, when we look at it's a pyramid. So you have to go up in a stepwise manner. We have to fulfill needs in a certain order. And I think there's some fluidity to this, but in general, you need to fulfill your physiological needs first. Like if you're starving, you're not going to be able to go to the next need. If you have your basic needs, food, water, warmth, rest, you can go up to safety. Once you've fulfilled those needs, it's like, okay, having like a safe home, a safe environment. After that, it's love and belonging. And that to me just speaks to how foundational that section is. It's that low in the pyramid. Like once you're not starving, once you're like warm enough to feel your fingers, like once you're safe enough to not be in fear for your life actively, the next thing you need is love. And I honestly think that love overarches all of it, but that belongingness, to be a part of something bigger, to be part of a community, that is so foundational as a need, as a person. As a bodybuilder, I see everyone get caught up in, all right, what's the diet, what's the training, this and that, and they like isolate themselves from a community because it can be a really isolating sport. And it's like those people don't last. Like you have to have a support system. You have to be part of something bigger than yourself in order to reach true fulfillment. And then after that, we have esteem needs where we feel a sense of accomplishment, which I think if you can find that community and that love and belongingness level, you fulfill the needs thereafter. Those needs of I want to feel like I'm using my shape to my full potential. I want to feel like I have a way to express my gifts and that I am appreciated for the gifts that I'm bringing to the table. And then self actualization, like reaching your full capacity, your full potential as a person, is your freedom to express what you bring to the world fully and
Mm,
without fear. That would be like the ultimate accomplishment.
yeah, I think that's so good. So good.
So it's a tricky conversation, and I know we bounced around a lot because religion is something that's really vague. When I was looking for definitions, I kept running into like, why is it so hard to define religion and blah blah blah? Because I think that it just means so many different things, but I don't really think the word matters. I think at the core of it is when our heart changes, our expression of self in the world changes. And religion is a way to express ourselves out of that spiritual belief. So I just want to encourage you guys to really dig into what it is that you believe and then find a way to insert yourself into some kind of service opportunity or some kind of community within the next couple of weeks and just see how you feel, like see how you come out of that experience and see what you learn. And again, you might find things that don't work. And like Dee said, that's the pruning process. That's where you maybe learning what you don't want is just as valuable as learning what you do want. And it can just help you fine tune as you find alignment on your path.
Yeah, and please leave more questions, more comments about this. I know that this is a very, you know, this has a ton to it, like we just said. So I think it'd be really cool to continue the conversation as well. If anybody has more questions or wants us to elaborate on something we spoke on, or just has their own, perspective that they want to share, I think it's really great to open up this conversation. It's really important, I think, right now.
Absolutely. So be sure to like, comment, subscribe below. We'll have another episode out for you guys next week. always appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next time.